Brant Cooper, one of my most favorite human beings, is back in the CTO studio with
Hi,
me.
Etienne.
Welcome,
Thanks for
Brant.
having me.
How are things in Encinitas,
Pretty
CA?
gloomy outside here today. Uh, I don't even know if you can call this June gloom. I guess I just called it gloomy, but it's like wet outside. I guess the plants love it.
Yeah, it's. I'm in Alpine, and it's also
What's
gloomy.
up with that?
Californians be Californian, man. What is going on?
Yeah.
You want sunshine. So for those who don't know, Brant is the founder of Moves the Needle, New York Times best-selling author of Lean Entrepreneur. The new book is in
Not
stealth
really. No, it's
mode.
actually
Is it
yeah. It's
leaking? Is it on the
you
dark
can
web?
actually pre-order from my website brantcooper.com or from your favorite retailer. Pre-orders are available. Disruption proof.
Okay. Disruption proof. Mm. One of the first things I learned in pitching startups was not to use the word
Yeah,
disruption.
we're over that. You can do that now. Yeah,
We could do
officially.
that now. So, Brant, when's your new book
I think
coming
it
out?
ships October 29th. So clearly the publishers need a
Okay.
long time to, I think they type it or something. I mean, I think they already have the finished manuscript and it still takes them to the end of October to get it out. So I don't know what's up with that.
Maybe they
Right.
rewrite it
Yes.
in
On those
cursive.
big turning blocks. And then they just they have to crank out one book at a time. Yeah.
Oh yes, the typesetters. Yes, they put in the letters and well, we've had several conversations lately, and one thing that I want to really focus on today with you is uh, at Seven CTOs, we're talking a lot about how the CTO shields their organization. So we've talked about shielding through intellectual property and not just patenting and copywriting and trade secrets, but to really think about the work we do and the intellectual property that comes with that. Now, we've done that. We are talking about compliance, risk management, so a lot of sexy topics. We're also talking about security assessments and compliance next month. But one thing that has been a prevailing theme for me is how optimizing process, being transparent about your security assessments and your ISO or SOC 2 compliance or SOC 2 reports and audits is that all presents your organization with a competitive advantage. And one of our themes soon is going to be what is the role that the CTO plays in moving the competitive advantage forward for the organization. And I wanted to just dig in with you on that topic and
Yeah.
just take it where
Okay.
it goes. One uh, one one thing I realize is there's competitive advantage through the way we address the market and the way we come up with products and innovation and all the work that goes into that through the lean thinking and all that. But there's also how we tool and help our own people inside the organization to think about how we do things, and that in and of itself starts positioning potentially more innovation, more thinking, and that you could draw from the far corners of your company for great ideas. So A bit of a long-winded setup, but I know we're going to cover all kinds of ground here. But that's where I'm coming from, and that's why I want to talk to you
Yeah,
and
well, so
get
I mean,
your
yeah, it
unfiltered
brings up all sorts of
thoughts.
ideas. I mean, one of the things I always appreciate about you, Etienne, and seven CTOs is pushing the boundary of what it means to be a CTO. In other words, the tendency is, especially the way we even start with the CTO conversation at a very early startup level, right? Like the CEO, they're always like, "Oh, well, I need to find a CTO," and the proper question, at that point is, really, do you need a software engineer to develop a product, or do you need a CTO? And the conversation literally starts that early. But even then, in more mature organizations, is what does it mean to be a CTO? And is it really about the technology and managing just the technology side of the house and security and some of these other things that you mentioned? How much does the CTO need to get involved with business strategy and with understanding the business side and understanding what are the obstacles for the company achieving its its goals, its objectives? And so I think that in modern business management, uh, we sort of allow uh, the chief officers of these different groups to limit their role to just being responsible for that group, and then it's sort of the CEO's role to bring all of those components together. And I think that's wrong. I think that in the digital age, what we really need is sort of a, and everybody's going to hate that I use this word, but we need the C-suite needs to be its own agile team, and not based upon hierarchy, but leadership comes from when the topic turns to something that individual chief officer is the leader of. And so it's like a special forces team. You're going off on a mission, and whoever's in charge of a particular aspect of the mission is the leader during that moment. And really, I think the C-suite needs to be the same sort of thing, where the mission is whatever the objectives are of the corporation. And so the CTO gets to weigh in on marketing and business and legal and human resources. And the same with the chief marketing officer gets to weigh in on things that have to do with technology to a certain degree. And I think that's difficult for people, but I think that we need to look at how we structure our companies, our organizations, and our roles. And even the C-suite needs to be more agile. And I think fundamentally the change is that we pretty much these days, we pretty much know we can build stuff. Uh, the biggest risk to companies is not intellectual property. Certainly security is up there, but it's not really technology. And so I think, during the last half of the 20th century, and even the first couple of decades of the 21st century, technology was still sort of at the core. If we build it, we think that we're going to be able to market and sell it. I don't think that's the biggest fundamental risk to businesses now. I think it's really more on the marketing and sales side. Should we build it rather than can we build it? And that shift in itself means that I think that the role of the CTO has to shift a little bit as well, and they can no longer be concerned primarily with the operating processes of their group. They need to be in the strategic discussions of where the business is going.
I love that because it always irks me a little bit when people try to compare product versus engineering as the what needs to be built versus the how it gets built. And while I guess at a truly technical level, that's probably true ish, I think what we're both agreeing and talking about is the bleed into all these areas, especially the higher up you go, the more strategic you are, that you want to be a part of all those conversations. And I often think it's not really it's not so much coming into those conversations as the expert in your domain. It's really that I think just gets you into the conversation. But ensuing participation and collaboration that then happens is like you said, that agility in the C-suite, the way that those conversations are facilitated and how they happen. It's almost functionally irrelevant where you come from. I mean, it's good, and you're there because you're smart and experienced in a certain field. But what happens next behind those closed doors, or wide open doors, or fishbowl doors, is different. There's a different level of discourse needed. And that's where it's not like, oh, well, we'll just tell the engineers how it gets, what needs to be built. They'll decide how it gets built. And so that's where I want the CTO to be a lot more involved in, hey, company, there are these 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 or 15 or 50 things that we can focus on to help leverage our competitiveness.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, like you said, you hire and promote smart people, and so the strongest CTO is the one with the experience and the knowledge, and has proven her chops in the engineering field, but your experience in the business world and in managing people and all of these other elements that go into being a leader, that's what gets you into the C-suite, right? And so once you're there, you can't be pigeonholed back into where you came from. And what I find interesting is one of the companies that I is one of the leaders, I think, in really rethinking their organization is ING, the bank in Europe that's headquartered in the Netherlands. And you often see that they move people around inside the C-suite and inside of business units in order to get that broad experience. And so you might be the CFO, and then you're the CIO, and then you're chief innovation officer, and then you're the CEO of the ING in Spain. And so I think it goes to what you're saying, is that once you have sort of the level of expertise within a domain that gets you into that level, where you actually then live at that level kind of doesn't matter. And you actually can move people around, because if they were to become CEO, the CEO does need to know a little bit about all of those functions. And so I think, another one of the topics that you and I have talked quite a bit about is really the experience that comes from the engineering side, that comes from the CTO side, with things like agile or agility, or what I say is the team is the new unit of work, and how we can organize and structure the way we do work differently. The group that has the most experience in doing that is the CTO and the engineering side. And so there's so much more than just the technical ability that they can bring to the rest of the company because of that experience. And I just fundamentally believe that at some level, and I'm a little bit, nervous about using the word agile, because I think that there's a lot of I don't know, there's some pushback on some of that now, but at least in terms of quote unquote agility, the whole company needs the positive aspects of that. And if I'm inside of a company, and where am I going to turn? Well, I'm going to turn to my CTO.
Yeah, and it's agile being really just responding to change, and to have those chops at every level in every aspect of the company is what is needed in this day and age. Let's talk about competition.
Okay.
So, competitiveness, as I mentioned in the opening, is often our ability to get things to the market quicker, to be listening to the customer more closely, to rally the troops, reassign budget, that agility to say, hey, on day 1, the customer asked for save to PDF, and on day 3, we gave it to them. And oh, wow, this company is responding to my needs. Um, in the context of competition, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, so I think that if I had to point to one thing that is a competitive advantage, I would say that it's insights, customer insights particularly, and maybe even insights into needs uh, more generally. So I think that there's a lot of companies that pretend to know their customers, or they try to automate the quote unquote feedback. Anything that doesn't require them to actually go and talk to human beings is sort of the standard. And I think that the reason is that, well, people are scared to talk to other humans, but also it's quote unquote not scalable. And so we can't just have meetings with customers. Um, I always like to point out that understanding our customers does not mean doing what our customer says. And so, even if the customer asks for some PDF feature, that doesn't mean that that's what the engineers actually run off and do. But the deeper that they can understand why the customer is asking for what it is that they're asking for, that provides perhaps opportunities. It could be a completely different product. It could be that they're using your existing product in ways that it wasn't intended. And so there's a different market opportunity there. So the more that we understand about what's driving the customer and their motivations and their aspirations, the more the product and engineers and marketers and everybody else can sit there and think, well, what's the best way for us to address what their true need is? And so I think that's actually how you win in the competition. I bring up needs because I have this idea that's in my new book around needs portfolio management instead of product portfolio management, or in addition to, but as a superset of product portfolio management. And what it is it's really taking that outside in ethos, customer centricity, and putting it even further, to the core of what the business is about. So needs fundamentally don't change over time. How different companies address those needs change. And so, if one thinks about it in terms of what are the needs that my current company is building solutions for, one can then evaluate how those needs will be addressed over time. For example, uh, in Peter Drucker's book, Innovation and Entrepreneurship, he talks about that when the baby boomers reached college age, all of these universities were like, oh my God, look at all of these kids coming to college. And they expand all of their products and services because this is, a great opportunity for growth. From a product portfolio view, what that means is okay, how do we extend that? How do we continue to grow that? How do we make that better this year than it was last year? And what happens is that the next generation comes along and it's half the size of the baby boomer population. And yet we've got all of these growth targets for all of our products and services for this college age. And there's just not that many people that have that need anymore. And it's purely a demographics change type of thing. Or it could be that once the iPhone started addressing a particular need or enabled us to address a need in a different way, well, then we've got to change all of our product plans in order to leverage that technology. So if we think about it in terms of needs, then we can take an approach that's a demographics approach, a technology approach, or even envisioning what future technology, what does nanotechnology maybe bring in 10 years to this? It allows us to look at our own products in terms of these different time horizons based upon all of these different changing conditions that we can start investigating today. We can do stuff today about it, but then we can also do something in 2 or 3 years. We can do something in 5 years, and we can dream about what it might look like in 10 years. But fundamentally, the needs that we're addressing, sort of our core DNA, don't really change that much. And we can look at different market opportunities based upon who else has those needs other than our existing markets. And it just gives a more holistic view of how we might take all of the different aspects of our company in order to address these needs over these time horizons.
So that's very interesting. Can you clarify for me the time horizon? I understand the needs changing. What did
Needs
you
don't
say
really
doesn't
change.
change?
How the needs are addressed does change. But so, like, if you're,
Oh,
people
okay.
are often struggle with the terms like, well, what problem are you trying to solve? Well, I'm a gaming company, so I'm not really solving any problem. And it's true, it's not really a problem, but they're addressing a need. They're addressing a need for entertainment. And so, how does our company address the need of people for entertainment?
Mm.
And okay, so we address the need by building these games or whatever. Okay, well, where else can we go? Who else has this need? Is there anything else that we're doing that can enable us to address these needs differently? What's the new technology that's coming down the pipe that we actually need to keep in mind as we evolve our products to address that need? What are some demographic changes that are coming that actually might shrink the market, even though our growth objectives say that we're going to grow year over year, but the need itself doesn't really change.
That is fascinating. That's quite an unblock for me because that speaks to what I said earlier, which is if the engineering is in the how things get built, as sort of maybe in the more negative light of a reaction to, oh, well, this is what we're building and this is, you guys decide how you're building it. In terms of the competitive advantage and this time horizon, the how things get built is obviously affected by invention and change and the future of everything. And so, who better to have in those discussions than the geeky engineers who are like, well, I know you're using the Ionic framework now, but there's this other thing that's going to project it onto, you know, thin air. And so that's why I want the CTO and their people in these
Yeah,
conversations from
totally.
the
I mean,
get go.
it's what R&D used to be, right? I mean, it was the research and development, and that research was really invention. But even if your business isn't in invention mode, they sure as heck need to be out there understanding what is being invented, right? And so there's the whole concept of technology scouting or startup scouting, and so that it means that we need to be involved in the community, the innovation economy, or whatever, in order to know these things that are coming. And we can just leave that to the innovation group, but I think that that's silly. I think that if you're a company that's dependent upon technology, as most organizations that have CTOs are, that's, to me, that belongs in engineering. That's where the expertise is. And so, I think that innovation has been sort of this catch-all bucket for everything that's on this far away time horizon, and it never gets any funding, and it never gets any real love because the return on investment is so far away. But I think that from a marketing ought to be doing that as well, and I think that R&D engineering should have their own time horizons, and corporate venturing is the same way. What should we be investing in this year and next year in order to allow us to capture more market? But also, what should we be looking at? What are the startups we should be investing in or thinking about acquiring that won't have return on investment for 5 or 6 or 7 years? I mean, so all of the different groups need to be thinking about these time horizons rather than just this innovation group where it doesn't really belong, in my opinion. And so for that to happen, then we kind of get back to the C-suite, and the C-suite needs to be looking at things in terms of needs, the evolution of needs, the evolution of the demographics, the evolution of the technology, and that allows them to then figure out how do the different departments work together in order to prepare the company for those different stages of growth.
Yeah, one of my friends used to talk about the R&D as really the quest for learnings, and the output of R&D isn't necessarily the hot new tech or the product, but it's really just a learning that the organization can use,
Yeah, I mean, so
useful
that's not to
learnings.
pimp my book more. But I mean, so that's like one of my 5 E's is exploration, which is
Dude,
yeah,
don't start on the E's, bro. I want
right.
to
Well, all
dig
right. Well,
into all of
exploration
those.
mode, it's just the
What are we
learning
do?
mode. And then I think all parts of the organization need to be able to balance both the execution that they have to get done with their learning.
Yeah, so I think to sort of cap the mindset slash C-suite approach is, hey CTO, yes you're delivering, yes you're building teams, yes you're optimizing the budgets, yes your uptime has increased by another 9, but really all of that needs to be sort of boxed up and placed in the hands of someone else so that you can start facilitating, encouraging, and be part of that much larger time horizon conversation to see where we are 2, 3, 4 years in the
Yeah, there's
future.
the strategy side, and then there's the operational side. The what do we need to do as an organization in order to better enable us to do the horizon side, the strategy side. And so then that's bringing in again sort of the learnings around agile and and other components of organizational structure.
Yeah, because in my my research on patenting strategies, um, one of the one of the most prevalent things that came out of that was not the new and usefulness of ideas and patented ideas. Obviously, you can't really patent code; you can copyright the code. But what really came out of that to me was, what culture do you have in place in your organization to help surface and empower the ideas of the many in your organization? What relationships do you have with service providers, attorneys, to just help you have the different conversations about what is considered competitive or patentable? And it's not necessarily the end, it's just the means to helping the whole organization move forward as a unit, as a team of teams, in order to anticipate where things are going and what else could be built. I know for instance that a lot of C-suite people don't always know what the CTO does. But likewise, a lot of what the engineers are doing at the sort of grassroots level isn't always bubbling up to management. Hey, I found this really cool way to pipe the CSV into the XML that changes it. And then you think, but hang on, we can open source that, or we can make that a package, and then we can build brand awareness, like so many of these unicorn companies do. They have a whole developer side that's just focused on developer advocacy through putting tools out there, and that ultimately contributes to your competitive advantage when you can
Right. Well,
hire
just
amazing people and attract them to your company. So it's
well,
such a
so think
complex
about that though.
system.
Think about like, okay, so the engineering team throws over to the marketing team, hey, we've got this really cool stuff here, and we can launch this whole developer network, and marketing's just going to be like, what? Where is this coming from? I mean, so I think that your primary point there that is the communications flow, and so this is where the agile movement really kind of has failed in my estimation, and it's really because it is only in R&D or engineering in any real way. And so the company itself is not agile if only one group inside is agile. And of course, we could debate till the cows come home that even a lot of the agile implementations have not made R&D agile or engineering agile, at least in terms of the agile manifesto. But the whole shift here, where power is on the edge, right? The consumer is making decisions. The consumer has all of these choices. Um, and inside the company, the power is still, at the top, hierarchical, in the core of the business. That's the fundamental that's the fundamental breakdown of most companies here as we get into the third decade of the 21st century. Agile is what changes that, because you're empowering teams then on the edge. And so, yep, the engineering team knows what the best solutions are. The engineering team has these great ideas. And over on the marketing side, or product management side or something, there's these, yeah, we understand what the customer needs are. Customer support is saying, hey, listen, this is what we're hearing. And so there's all of these ears, sort of to the ground, or to the railroad rails, and they know what's going on out there, and yet the decision making is still centralized. But the failure has been that the communications flow doesn't come from the edge and back up to leaders, and it doesn't go across the company from marketing to engineering, and from engineering to marketing. Uh, uh, One of the very first companies that I did product management for, the reason why I was put in charge of product management is because the head of sales would walk into the engineering's cubicle and go, I need you to build this feature. And she was a very powerful woman. And the engineers would go, yes, ma'am. And they would code it up. It didn't matter whether that would result in a sale or not. It, most often probably did not, because it's just not how things work. But in a larger organization, we're all siloed out. That information is not going up the company, and it's not going across the company. And I don't think that can be fixed until everybody becomes
Mm.
more agile. And then we have to start implementing a very purposeful communication structure, such that management and leaders are getting the information they need in order to, correlate those to what the priorities are, and even change the priorities necessarily. And then that information flows back down, in terms of resource allocation and mission.
What a what a what a strange world to imagine, where the edge is empowered to
Yeah.
change the sprint.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, the big flashing word there that has got some broken letters in it, it's kind of hanging skew, is over the dive bar in maybe the Family Guy,
Yeah.
is trust.
Yeah.
Like, it's you have to really trust your people to
So I think that
not
that's,
screw things up, and even if they do, to see that
yeah.
as a
So how do we
learning.
change that? I mean, I think that I think that's right. I think that what's interesting to me is that middle management is put into this tight squeeze, where they're supposed to be managing these agile teams, and so they're producing all of the information, and yet the leaders haven't changed the way they manage, and so they get top down pressure to do things
I think
this
that's
old
gold.
way, and they get this bottom up, and so they're caught in the middle, and we haven't done the training for middle
So
management, and we
true.
haven't empowered them to actually understand what their role is. And I think that's the next big thing here, is we're really going to start focusing on the skills and whatnot that middle management needs. Um,
I mean, have we locked ourselves into an agile engineering process that then gets wiped out? Have we been locked in a process of trying to waterfall metrics agility in a company so that the higher ups can understand what's
yeah,
going
I don't
on?
know. I mean, I guess I don't have a good visibility into what the metrics look like now, but yeah, I mean, I think that the old school KPIs, OKRs are actually measuring the amount of work people are doing. It's their task generated type of metrics, as opposed to what we really need in an agile world is progress towards desired outcome metrics. So it's what I call our learning metrics. In other words, we learn how we're making progress and whether we're making progress, so that the calendar is not dictating the percentage done. It's actually what percentage we are towards completion of the mission that is being measured.
But that's I completely agree with you. But isn't that where the unstoppable force meets the immovable object, which is agility and sprint planning says we have capacity. We want everyone to be creative. We want people to manage themselves. and we're going to do stand-ups to just kind of find out how we can unblock each other. But let's make sure we time box. I'm all for time boxing so that you can see, hey, I think I can do this in 2 weeks, not from a deadline point of view, but from a somewhat mini estimation point of view to help everyone sort of work together. But then you end up in a larger system that where the CTO is being asked, well, when can we release this product? And that's not necessarily an unfair question, but it's two
Yeah,
different
I think it's
paradigms.
true when there's a new product launch, but in terms of existing products, you're hopefully streamlining getting things out and tested with real customers as quickly as possible. Um, I think for new releases, uh, I don't know. I mean, I guess I think that we need to get away from the whole launch idea. I think the product launch is dead. I think it's bullshit, and I think that it's been actually not true for ages. And I think it's still just it's old school project management. It's not really product management.
Version 5, version 5.1, version
That's all
5.2.
that's all managing by calendar. It's not managing by percentage done. So I remember.
So if
Well, I
we
was just going
so,
to say
okay,
that
go ahead,
I,
go ahead.
as a product manager and head of product management and marketing and business development for a startup back in the early aughts, we launched a hardware platform, um, and this was old school, traditional. We were in there negotiating with engineers about what we're going to fit in there and what bugs are going to be fixed, and we had a launch date, and we launched the product, and it was horrible. It was just it was the product wasn't done, and customers immediately found all sorts of problems. And so what we did is we just chilled. We just kind of like worked with those early adopters that had bought the product, and we iterated on the product for the next 6 months until we had what was then a pretty solid shippable version. And then we start the marketing and the sales of it. This whole old school idea of the big launch is just BS. And so there's really no reason why you can't do that sort of classic lean startup approach, which is not launching to everybody. That's like a mythology of it. It's who are your early adopters? If you're selling to businesses, who are the 3 customers that will come in and work with you to finalize a shippable working version that solves problems significantly enough that they'd be willing to pay you some decent money for it? And then once you've done that with a handful of customers, now you can start rolling out the marketing plans and the selling plans and all the rest. The big launch doesn't help you. It's just BS. So we need to stop doing it. And then that
I
solves your
think that
problem,
is
because what we're measuring is progress towards a minimum viable product, and we don't know what's viable until it's out in the market to some degree.
so so it would seem that if we could warm up, or if we could strengthen an organization's competitiveness, that really developing and designing a process and then getting everyone's buy-in that this is how we're going to do it seems like about the process, like you just described sort of offhand. Like, listen, it's not about releasing to everybody. It's not about massive marketing campaigns behind a version promising, you know, the goose that lays the golden egg. It's you're in a constant, in a process, and this is where I think the trust will come back. Is if there's a process that is empowered to quickly and effectively take it from the edges idea into the market, bounce back into the market, bounce back, and there's a process that everyone can trust, then you can try anything always, because there's a sense that we know how to deal with the neckbeards, DevOps dudes idea that no one wants to listen to, but he may have a really incredible idea
Yeah,
that
I mean,
needs to be tried
I
out.
think that's right. I think
And
that
so
the one other thing I want to throw in there is this idea around uncertainty, and you and I, again, we've sort of chatted about this before, but if for a moment we can imagine where everybody in the company is on a team, so everybody is working in some sort of a quote unquote agile fashion, and the sprint lengths can differ, the missions differ, how the managers want to implement their version of agile can differ, it doesn't have to be uniform, it's not a one size fits all approach, yada yada yada. You're inside of an organization, when you're developing a product, there's some things that you know to be true, and so your agile team that is working on known stuff is all engineers doing things that they know. The team is formed maybe by the different level, the different disciplinary skills, the different domain expertise in order to accomplish their mission. But as you get towards the market for a new product, you've got increased uncertainty around whether you're going to build the right thing, whether there's understanding the marketing, understanding what the customer needs are, understanding the selling. Where there's more uncertainty, your agile team becomes more cross-functional, and this is then how you get the alignment between the different parts of the organization. It's how you get marketing and product management and engineering and sales and support, all of these different parts aligned, because as you increase uncertainty, the agile team is made up of representatives from all of those groups. And it's their responsibility to figure out the unknown part of launching a new product. And then they get to bring that all back down into their organization. And so there's this shared responsibility for getting the product out, as opposed to the very classic linear siloed way where a product is finally released and launched, and sales can't sell it, so they blame marketing, and marketing can't, nobody cares, and they blame, engineering. And I mean, it's just a circle jerk at that point. But if you have in that the responsible team for the go to market where there's a lot of uncertainty is a cross functional team.
then with the cross-functional team, though, you have a different challenge, right? You have personality profiles and biases. You can have that even in those meetings. Like, well, the engineer is just going to say it can't be done. The marketer is going to be uber excited about what the possibilities, and the salesperson just needs to know when it's got done so they can start selling it. So I think idealistically, having it be cross-functional when there's uncertainty, you're dealing with
Right.
how do you
And so,
collaborate. But then that's
well, I
basically
mean,
coaching, I
it's really
suppose.
hard. A lot of experience underneath their belts that they need to like let go of. But I mean, in a true agile, empowered agile team fashion, they're responsible for the release. They're not there responsible as representing their group. They're there as, it's the same way we were talking about the C-suite in the past, is that they're all responsible for all aspects of the release. They can bring their own expertise because they have it, but it's not as I'm here representing engineering. No, I'm here because I want to work here and I want to accomplish this mission, which is the successful launch. And so when marketing needs, some engineering resources to do some growth hacking work, the engineer there on the team can either supply it herself or, can go back and try to find resources. And so you're, I guess it is idealistic of me, but the idea is that, you're responsive to the mission, and that's what you're there bought into, not there representing your group.
Yeah, so I see that team then as somehow, if I could just describe perfection, somehow the engineers work on something and they have an awareness that, wow, this is something that's going to help my company. That to me already feels like a massive chasm because you're under pressure. Your sprint manager is gonna be concerned about your progress to the cards that have been designated. Then I guess there needs to be a process where you can teach, educate, excite your employees about, hey, we can drive our competitiveness on a top level strategically, but for us to survive and for us to take it into the next level, yes, let's try this VR goggles way to change directory into a new path. Let's try the
Yeah,
hand
so
wave motion.
it's definitely not for
How
everybody,
does
right? But I mean, I guess the positive side is that there's not going to be that many cross functional teams inside of a company. But so to me, again, the best analogy is a special forces team, right? So you have just because you have special forces doesn't mean you don't have an army squad anymore, right? You have an army squad, and you've got 25 riflemen or whatever the modern terminology is, right? And so you can even have teams within those teams, right? But a special forces is, no, we have a mission. We're going to go take out Saddam Hussein or whatever, Osama bin Laden. And so what we're going to do is put on that team the right skills, right? But it's a special forces, right? It's a Navy SEALs team. So it's not like they're just pulling, 10 people from the Army squad. They're people that have the right mentality and they're trained in a particular way, and that they are then able to perform regardless of hierarchy. They're able to perform in service to the mission. And so I would guess, and this is what I firmly believe, to be honest, is that companies have those people. And those people are most likely now being wasted inside the organization because they're just doing stuff that they're told to do, or they're being made into managers, even though they don't want to manage anybody, because that's the normal old school 20th century way of promoting people. Is you take your rock star engineer who doesn't want to manage anybody, he wants to code, and we go, no, now you're a manager. No, but so you put an individual like that on a special forces team, and then they get to work with different parts of the organization in order to accomplish a mission. And so it is not the prevalent attitude inside the company, but there are people like that, I guarantee you, in your company.
let's walk let's take the so let me take the Osama bin Laden example. Let's say I'm aware that there's a mission and we're planning the mission and I'm part of the special forces squad and all that. And one night I go out for drinks with my buddies in Afghanistan, and I walk into a pub and I'm like, holy shit, he's sitting in the corner of this bar right now. We have a whole mission to take him out on over there, but now I'm just seeing him right here. So you're not going to take out your pistol and start
Yeah.
shooting, right?
Well, I don't
Or
know,
shoot you.
but I think
The reason I'm going there is because of the innovation, ideas, the creativity often presents itself at the most inopportune times. The business never seems ready to formulate a mission around an idea. The idea comes, people have ideas, people are creative. So how does
well,
one
so
empower that?
I think that they're in your actual example. I'm guessing that those people have rules of engagement, and so they know what they're allowed to do and what they're not allowed to do in that moment. And so I think that they're so there's a
Got it.
culture, and there's ethics, and there's rules, and all of those things apply inside of a business as well. And so
That's a very important. You know what you should do? You should make
hey, good
ethics one of
idea.
your
I should write
E's.
that down. Does that make 6 or 7 E's? I'm up to 14 E's now.
Actually, Actually, that's a very very good point, which deliciously crumbles my my little bar, walks into a bar analogy. Is yeah the rules the rules of participating in the system, of participating in the for instance, like just because you had a good idea is not a great reason to tell your director of engineering the next day that you didn't actually work on the thing because you had this other idea. There could be rules of engagement to say, hey, listen, if you have a solid idea, this is the process that we follow at the company to and this is how we incentivize. We're super jazzed that you have them, but please, as CTO, as our we want these things to bubble up. We encourage this type of creativity and these types of ideas, but there is a way to be involved in the process that does require adherence to
Right, and
rules
we don't,
and
and
common
in most organizations
understandings.
we don't do that very well, to be honest. And so I think that the example we were laying out before was a product that we had already decided to build, and whether we do the big launch and how can we do that better, right? But companies do need to have ways for employees to feel empowered that they can come up with ideas. But ideas really are a dime a dozen. I mean, there's just no value in ideas. With the value, it comes from evidence that the ideas are good ones. And so I don't even want people to bring me ideas. I want you to bring me evidence that the idea is a good one. And are you willing to do any of the groundwork yourself on your own time? How passionate are you about this particular idea? Are you willing to go talk to customers first? Are you willing to go and run a lean startup experiment to try to figure out if there's any data you can gather in support of your idea?
Yeah, but aren't you? But now you're
What
pissing all
part?
over it, Brant. Hey, you have a cool idea. You have a cool idea, but I'm not interested
Yeah,
until you go do
ideas
all this other
literally a
shit
dime a
work.
dozen. Bring me evidence that your idea is good.
Well, ideas, in my mind, ideas are
Dude,
conversation starters.
companies just, put up a suggestion box. I mean, it's like, and it's like,
Freaking
you just like you pull out the
suggestion
bottom drawer of the
box.
suggestion box and there's a trash can underneath. I mean, it's like there's listen, people can sit.
No, I
Listen,
get
I
it. I
hear
get
about
it.
this all the time. I mean, there's a ton of companies and there's a bunch of platforms out there that it's just to manage ideas. And there are people that'll sit back and go like, I sent in 10 ideas last month and none of them have been worked on. And it's like, well, screw you. Like, why do you think anybody should work on your idea? It's like, you go into Quora and every other question is, how do I get investment without people stealing my idea? And I'm all like, nobody gives a shit about your idea. Literally.
Is one of your
No.
E's empowering?
No.
No, I hear you. I hear you. I'm just wondering for the again for the engineering team who may have developers who don't want to gather evidence because they don't like talking to people,
I
or
can't help everybody. I mean, I think that if you think you've got a great idea, then you ought to be able to go to bat for it. If you get
so I guess the point is just defining what going
totally,
to bat looks like. So the evidence doesn't mean, the evidence could mean different
totally,
things in different companies, but the point is just graduate your idea from a brain fart to an actual potential doable
yeah. There's
evidence
no company that
generating
I've worked
something.
with that didn't have a shortage of ideas, or they did have a shortage of ideas. None of them have a shortage of ideas. They have too many ideas. And so if a company has too many ideas, then it's just a supply and demand problem, right? You've got to create a hurdle for those ideas to get over. And if you don't, then decisions are made the same hierarchical command and control way that they've always been made. The top people, the hippos in the room, choose completely randomly without any evidence. Oh, I like that idea, but I hate all of those ideas. Well, that leader doesn't know shit. They don't know that one idea is better than the others. And so it actually is, it puts the power back into a structure where the centralized makes the decisions, even though it's the people out on the edge that have the data. So to me, it's like you're just not doing anybody any service by just saying, yeah, bring me all your ideas. I mean, it just doesn't help anything.
So a potential application of this could be I'm on my engineering team while we're coding something, we discover something, gave us an idea to implement a new feature. A potential application could be, okay, great, those ideas, there are thousands of those. Can you then maybe plus that idea with some evidence that would show the person, the decision maker, or whatever, the manager, that what, this isn't just something we came up with. We actually can show you analytics that we actually ran a quick A/B test, sir, without y'all knowing, and here it is. So it's actually the communication presentation
That's right.
skill of saying,
Well, so
yeah, I love
in
that.
a
I love
mature
that.
organization,
My
they'll have the 10% free time, so the engineer feels empowered that they can actually go and do that, and they maybe even have an experiment infrastructure set up. Intuit has this, where between January and April of every year, they take a sliver of their traffic, and it's all just experiment traffic. And so all of the other, all of these people like get to take that sliver of traffic and run experiments against that sliver of traffic in order to do split testing. So that's a pretty mature process, but it's something that a CTO even can decide to implement. That there's these ways we're going to set up this experiment infrastructure, and we're going to actually team with product management or team with marketing, so that if you actually want to go talk to customers, we're going to help you do that. We're going to enable that. We'll go with you or whatever. I mean, so there's different levels of maturity inside of an organization where the resources are supplied so that that engineer actually isn't just off on their own, but there's a process for them to follow in order to generate the evidence.
I love it. I love it. And then you train, drive home,
That's right.
train
There's
on that more than, because otherwise
Yeah, go ahead.
those ideas just go out. They just go out to your own. Oh, I have a startup idea. Although um, Brant, I'm gonna stop us right here, and then I'm going to do
Yep.
part 2 with you. Is that cool? Okay, so just hang on for 1 second.